The Kerala government's decision to appoint an IAS officer as state secretary in charge for matters relating to external cooperation has attracted criticism from BJP leaders and even the Ministry of External Affairs, who said that foreign affairs is purely a subject of the Union government. So, is this an abuse of power? Is there a constitutional validity to the decision? To talk about this and more, I am joined by Mr. Alok Prasanna, who is a co-founder of Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. Alok is also an expert in areas of constitutional law, urban development, and judicial reform. So let's start with what your thoughts are regarding the Kerala government's move to appoint an IAS officer. As I just quote, it's not a foreign secretary, but it's a state secretary in charge for matters concerning external cooperation. So what do you think about this?
I think too much is being made of a very innocuous move. I think all our state governments, at some level or the other, have been involved in what would very, very broadly say foreign policy. Whether it is, say, helping coordinate relief and rescue efforts of Indians stranded in different parts of the world, whether it is in advising the Union government on important foreign policy issues because they have historical, cultural links, or whether it's something as simple as helping attract investment to their state through their networks. States have not always seen their work as solely limited to what happens within the boundaries and territories of their state. I think they're all mature enough to understand that there is great benefit to not just the state but to the country. If a Karnataka chief minister goes out, attends the akka meets, which happen once every year, which is this conglomeration of Kannada Kutas in the US, or if Chandrababu Naidu goes to the US, or if a Punjab chief minister like a Bhagwant Mann goes to Canada, right? I'm just giving examples off the top of my head. I think we have seen over the years the benefits that maintaining these kinds of relationships with Indians abroad has brought not just to the state but to the country. And I think it's a fairly innocuous move because no one is expecting Kerala to make an independent foreign policy on this basis.
Correct.
They do not have the capacity or the capability to do so. What they're doing is giving responsibility for these activities, which have anyways taken place, which I think the Union government has not discouraged actively in any way, to some nodal officer to make sure they take place in a systematic way, to make sure that there is some responsibility and there is, more importantly, institutional memory about these things, right? It's not just there has to be one CM who thinks about everything all the time. Tomorrow, if the CM changes, tomorrow, if the party in power changes, it's not like the Keralites living in the Gulf will disappear, or that they will not have concerns, or they will not want to reach out to people in Kerala. You'll need someone with that institutional memory. You'll probably need a secretariat with that ability to engage with them in a sustained, methodical manner. And I think this is a good move. I don't think there is anything problematic with it.
Right. But some of the criticism that has arisen because of this move, right, including BJP leaders and even the Ministry of External Affairs has come out and said that under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, any matters relating to foreign affairs is under the control of the Union government. So how do you look at this when we talk about the current issue in hand?
So let's first understand what the 7th schedule is. The 7th schedule should be read along with Articles 245 and Article 246. What they provide for is the law-making power, in the sense that what they are saying is that the Union Parliament will have power to make law in List 1 and List 3 of the 7th schedule, and state will have the power to make laws on List 2 and List 3 of the 7th schedule. At no point do they say that you cannot think about it or have a person who will think about it or do anything about it in a non-legal, non-legally binding way. If we were to take that rigid interpretation of the 7th schedule, there will be several ministries of the Union government which will have to be shut down tomorrow. Agriculture is a state subject. What is the Ministry of Agriculture doing? The urban development, right, municipalities is a state subject. Why is there a Union Ministry of Housing and Urban Development? Land resources. Land is purely under the state government. Why is there a Union Ministry for Land, right? Relief of disabled. I mean, to pick a very small topic, relief of disabled is a state subject. Why is there a Union Ministry or a department looking at this? We cannot take such a pedantic view. I think that is a complete misreading of the Constitution. At no point does the Constitution say or expect that these are all such rigid fields, that these are such watertight compartments that you cannot think about, act about, or take any action in any manner whatsoever about this area. Let me give you another example of something that states already do, which might strictly already fall within the union government context, which is the benefits for retired soldiers, right? These are all people who receive pensions from the union government, but the ensuring their welfare is handled at the state level. Most major states have a Sainik welfare department. Karnataka has one. Punjab, of course, has a huge one. Himachal has a huge one. So now, even though the pension of the retired soldiers, they may be dealing directly with the union government for other things like ensuring access to schemes, for treatment, for children, for the jobs or education for their children, the state takes care of it. And these are people who have directly worked at the union level. So you can't, or for the union on quote unquote defense. So in that way, you cannot draw these hard and fast rules. You cannot draw these strict boundaries where you say this. It may be a matter for legislation. Obviously, the state cannot make a law on foreign policy or foreign affairs. Obviously, the union cannot make a law purely dealing with urban government unless there is a specific constitutional provision for it. But that doesn't extend to how governance actually takes place.
Right.
That doesn't extend to how the remit of the state's governance takes place.
Right.
And at the end of the day, the Constitution, of course, is a document which enables cooperative federalism, right? It helps resolve conflicts in federalism, but it is not a document to make finding solutions or working on a better way, on a better governance model impossible. Right. So I think we cannot take such rigid, dogmatic and pedantic reading of the 7th schedule, and especially taking it out of the context which is to be read with Article 245 and 246.
So in the current situation, what you're saying is the Kerala government's decision is not unconstitutional.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so because what the chief secretary of the Kerala government was saying was that this is not that they are doing any, they're not going to interfere diplomatically, or they will not make any laws like you were saying. This is purely for better communication for the development of the state.
That's right.
So has such a move ever taken place prior to this, or any other examples of states making such a moves in the past?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
No.
See, there are informal mechanisms. In a sense, there is, I'm sure, someone within government who is coordinating, say, the Karnataka chief minister's visit to the US, where the chief minister speaks to, interacts, engages with the Kannada-speaking communities in the United States. Or there might be somebody like that in Punjab. I don't know if anyone was designated as such. There may have been somebody who's functionally doing this job, but perhaps now Kerala government has given them a specific title and a specific role.
Yes.
So I wouldn't know, and maybe somebody who's better well-versed in state bureaucracy might be able to answer that question definitively. But I'm sure this role was somewhere there. Somebody needs to be able to reach out, because chief minister can't just land up in Washington DC and say, I want to speak to all the people, Kannada speaking people here. There is serious investment of time and energy which takes place in these exercises. So I think that has been formalized in a certain way, which I don't think is a problem.
So basically, all the duties and responsibilities that were before this being done by other ministers or the chief minister has been handed over to a particular post, right?
Yeah, in some senses, it may be, which may have been split across different ministries. It might have been, say, be coordinated by a culture department, or it may have been coordinated by some other department in some way. Maybe they're trying to put this together so that all these activities are done in a systematic way.
Right.
Again, this is something which, say, the Kerala government will answer in more detail. Right. But at least from the title and from what has been carried in the news, to me, this seems to be the primary task of the secretary who has been appointed to this position.
Right. So you must have heard, I'll just bring an example of what really happened. A couple of months back, I think last month, there was a fire that happened in Kuwait. A shopping complex caught fire. And the Kerala health minister in this regard was planning on going to Kuwait to oversee, because most of the people who lost their lives in that incident were Malayalis, by people from Kerala. So, but the union minister had rejected her permission, saying that the foreign affairs minister has already been there and they've taken. So in such instances, right, will having a separate a position like this, a coordinator, a secretary for external affairs, make a big difference, because they are directly in communication with foreign countries?
I think more than making a difference, I think it will be good if someone who communicates constantly with the external affairs minister or the ministry to coordinate better with them, things like this would be helpful. Because to me, it's unfortunate because look, all this health minister, Kerala and all is our internal distinction. When you go out there, you're representing India.
India, correct.
Correct. You are maybe going because your job as a Kerala health minister is the title that you have today. But if you're going out there to help Indians, and you're going out there because a lot of Indians who are Malayali speakers. I think it was very petty on the part of the external affairs ministry to say we don't want you to go there. I mean, nobody is saying don't have the power to say yes or no. I'm saying the way you exercise this power does not necessarily keep India's interests in mind. I don't think the union government should see that states, when they want to be involved with foreign affairs, that they're going to fundamentally conflict with what the union government wants, because they cannot conflict. They will not have the capacity in any way to conflict. What they are doing is complementing and supplementing the union government's role. We see, and this is something which I dealt with in my article for the News Minute.
Right.
We repeatedly have these complaints which keep coming up that the Indian Foreign Service is understaffed. We don't have enough people to staff all our embassies. A lot of key functions are being done by the same person. To me, this is a great opportunity for the union to say, there are some functions which we don't think necessarily needs an India Foreign Service person. It could be done by an IAS or an IPS person who's at the state level, who might be looking for a more interesting posting than what they're currently doing at the state level. They can in some way, with having the state government on board, right? If we were to, and let's imagine a good faith discussion. Union government comes and tells Kerala, look, we have to necessarily engage with Malayali speaking people across the Gulf. Can you depute about 10 IAS and IPS officers, short posting, 2 years, who will be posted in all these countries, whose job will be to only just reach out to Malayalis, to reach out to Malayalam speakers in these states, build the relationships, understand their concerns, give us the feedback. They will be working under the supervision of the Indian ambassador in that particular state, in that particular country. No one's saying there'll be independent agents reporting to the Kerala state government. Today, we know IAS officers who go and work with the Asian Development Bank. Why? It builds their skills. It gives India a higher profile. People are deputed from state, who are currently in state government, end up working there. It's not that they have to be only working with the Indian government to get deputed. So when we are okay with that, why not use the talents and the abilities of officers at the state level to further India's foreign policy goals, foreign policy missions? So in that sense, and it doesn't have to be, maybe not every country needs it. Maybe we identify the 10, 12 biggest countries where we have key foreign policy interests, and where we see that connecting with the diaspora, there are cultural links, and there is the immediate neighborhood context also, right? Given the immediate neighborhood context, I'm talking about, say, Nepali speakers who are perhaps living in Bihar, or Bengali speakers in West Bengal and Assam and Tripura, who will have connections to people in Bangladesh. These are, I think, and to not even say anything about Tamil speakers in Sri Lanka, right? We cannot assume that there will be a certain approach and antipathy towards this. The more you involve state governments who have a closer ear to the ground about all these issues, the better I think we will manage our relations with not just our immediate neighborhood, but also with the major powers. Because this is perhaps one of the things that everybody talks about, but unfortunately is not being actioned, the soft power.
When you say major powers, right, can you explain that part?
So when I sort of say, so this is a great example I learned once from a US foreign policy expert, I think, who had come to speak at Nalsar. And he gave this brilliant example, which I think even today stands good. He said for years and years, Arab countries tried to influence the American policy towards Palestine with zero impact. Right? Small impact was there. Nobody said nothing happened. But they made zero impact. On the other hand, Israel was able to get its way on a lot of things. This is back in 2005-06, he was speaking to us. Israel gets its way on a lot of things. Why? And of course, there are larger issues also, but this is how that relationship is maintained. And Netanyahu, I think, was also PM then, if I remember correctly, or whoever else it was. He said when the PM comes to Washington, D.C., his first port of call is not Washington, is not the White House. Sometimes his first port of call is New York. He goes and speaks to prominent members of America's Jewish community to understand, like there is this AIPAC, I think,
Correct.
which is involved, right? He goes and speaks to them to understand, to be able to say, how should I approach? How does your politics work? Who does the president listen to? What argument will work with them? And then goes to DC, right? And then goes to has the meeting with the White House or the Pentagon or whoever else it is, because um, they understand that we have a group of people here who share our same values, goals, thinking about the world, who aren't antithetical to what Israel wants to achieve. So speak to them and understand how to deal with the government, right? Whereas the Arab countries believe, I mean, it could be because Israel is a democracy and knows this is how democracies work. And maybe the Arab countries didn't realize this is how democracies work. Arab countries would just go, make a list of demand. You say no, and you go away. You achieve nothing. So in a way, having the diaspora here, right? Forget about who gets into power, who doesn't get into power. Anybody who's been living in the US, who has worked in a different set of industries, knows how the system, the politics, the incentives work. They are somebody who can influence, right? The way in which all of that happens. They're somebody who can tell you you're barking up the wrong tree trying to ask for this. Instead, think of it doing this way. And it's not that you can one day rock up and say, tell me how I should deal with your president, right? You have to be able to maintain those links over years. You have to tell them, this is not a one-way relationship where you give me everything that I want and I'll say thank you, bye. You have to make them feel that your country values you, owes a lot to you, and we haven't forgotten about you. And I think this great initiative was actually started during Atal Bihari Vajpayee, this whole Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. Right? You don't see them as some lost causes who have left the country. You see them as an enormous resource of people who can help further India's larger development goals. So in a way to allow purely partisan politics to shape foreign policy discourse about your country, I think that's a very bad way to do this. I think you have to keep aside which party you are from. And I'm 100% sure if the Union government does it, every state government will immediately follow suit. They also know we are representing India. We are not just representing our state or the people who speak our language.
But isn't there a difference, like when you're saying that Netanyahu is the Prime Minister of Israel, like if Modi is going to New York and doing a howdy program, he's representing India and he is the Prime Minister of India, right? Atal Bihari Vajpayee. But when a Bhagwat Man goes to Canada, or when Pinarayi Vijayan goes to say any of the Gulf countries and interacting with the diaspora there, can the current criticism hold against these visits as well, saying that why is a chief minister of a state going and interacting with his diaspora? Or
I'll turn it around.
Yeah.
Did Modi reach out to Bhagwant Mann after he came back from Canada? Supposing there was such a meeting that actually happened, right?
Yeah.
Does a Modi pick up the phone and call a Pinarayi Vijayan saying, how was your meeting?
He
right?
not-
Or just a half an hour debrief, right? Was there something interesting that you think that we can do something about? Was there some insight that maybe we haven't captured? Maybe it doesn't need to be a personal one-to-one call. In the relevant person in the PMO reach out to the relevant person in the CMO, saying what are the main takeaways? Look, it may be that somebody is going to do some pure brand building.
Correct.
But when people are aware that yes, this is something which could contribute in a measurable way to the country's progress, they will of course take it a lot more seriously. They will not just go to have a few show events and come back, right? So, and you're enormously expanding your capacity. No matter how many trips a prime minister may make, they still have only 365 days in a year, 24 hours in a day. If you could increase the number of PMs in the country by 10, right, to be able to do the kind of soft diplomacy. No one's asking them to negotiate directly. But if you want to be able to engage with the diaspora, with key people whom you may have connections to, I think the union government should leverage this. You don't need to see the state governments as encroaching on your territory. You should be able to say, here are 28 governments who are adding their resources to what we have right now. And I think that is not fundamentally against India's constitutional vision. As I've written in my article, Punjabi Pakistan and Indian Pakistan were part of the same political entity for much longer than there has been an India or a Pakistan as we know it, right? Bengal has been an entity from like what we know today as West Bengal, stretching up all the way up to Tripura and places, has been an entity for much longer than any of these places have been a country and so on, right? And you are talking about thousands of years of connection. thousands of years of common culture, thousands of years of understanding local context that is not it can't be understood immediately by an outsider. Why don't we leverage that, right? Why don't we leverage that to be able to say, this is how I think India's foreign policy can truly leverage the fact that it's not just one government doing a policy. Yes, it is only one India which is doing the policy, but it doesn't have to be one government.
Correct.
Right? And you can find ways to supplement. It's not as if strategic policy is going to come out of West Bengal, or for that matter, how to deal with the UN is not going to come out of Bombay. It is ultimately going to be the MEA only with the PMO, which is going to decide all of this. But the fact is, you can do it well or you can do it badly. You can do it badly by assuming that the 28 other states are your enemies in some ways, unless they're ruled by the same party. Or you can say there are 28 states whose resources, thinking, networks, culture I can use to do my job better.
So just coming back to the basic question. So as of how things stand right now, state governments does have the right to interact with the diaspora abroad without making any laws, without making any diplomatic progress, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So where can we find a middle ground in this conflict, right? In this conflict between the union and the state when it comes to foreign affairs?
I don't see why there should be a conflict in the first place. Forget about a middle ground. There is nothing fundamentally which is opposed to what the union wants to do and what the states are trying to do. I think it is just about dropping this partisan political idea that everything is a zero-sum game. If the state does something well, it reflects badly on the union or vice versa. I think that needs to be dropped, because as I see it, there is nothing, it is a conflict here. No state is trying to say, we will have an independent foreign. I don't think even Kerala seriously says that, right? No state is trying to say that we will contradict India's position on Russia and go and support Ukraine. Nobody is doing that. Nobody even wants to or says anything like that. But all of the states are, of course, in the process of developing their own whatever states and attracting money, investment, the diaspora. They will, of course, benefit India.
Okay.
Right? They will, of course, benefit India. If today Chandrababu Naidu goes out, reaches out to, let's say, entrepreneurs in the United States, a lot of whom are Telugu speaking, to say, Andhra Pradesh is open for business. Please come and make investments. Who benefits? India benefits.
Correct.
If Bhagwant Mann goes to the Punjabi diaspora and says, please come back and invest in Punjab. We have enough of agriculture is done. We are looking to create more jobs. Who benefits? India benefits. So I think this zero-sum notion that we have, unfortunately, made it norm in our politics, that if the center does something, state should do opposite and vice versa. Or if state succeeds, then center fails and vice versa. That should be dropped. I don't see the conflict at all if states are more involved in our foreign affairs very broadly. Right? Foreign policy may be something that you specifically make. But even there, if you take from the states, if you learn from the states, if you involve the states, use the states to supplement your capacity. And there's a term for it also. It's called para-diplomacy. Right? And it's not unique to India. A lot of federal countries, there are cities which want to engage with us. Forget about provinces. Forget about whether it's a New South Wales. Maybe it's a city of Melbourne which wants to reach out to India and engage with India. Whoever else in India. Right? None of them are going against their national policy. They're saying that there are things which we can add to how our nation does foreign policy without contradicting in any way, and also meeting our own objectives.
Correct.
So I think what the union government should do is to sort of encourage this kind of para-diplomacy, not get caught up in the minutiae of whose turf is being encroached and who is winning and who's not.
So before we conclude, I'd like to tell you all that there is a story published in the News Minute reported by journalist Nidhi Suresh about the 2017 sexual assault case of a Malayalam actor. This case shook the Malayalam film industry as well as the Kerala society. The story is currently behind paywall, and to read the story, become a paid TNM subscriber today.